highlight three which I think are of particular significance for us today and which speak to my own interests and my own professional expertise. The first of these is the challenges associated with climate change. This is something core to my academic work, but it's core to my personal motivations in running for public office. And I have found myself speaking quite extensively about climate change in these last 3 months in a context when many others, including many others who might be sympathetic to the need for us to take action, have prioritized other issues. And we are at risk of losing sight of the deep, deep need for us to reduce our impacts on the natural environment in such a way that we can actually improve the functioning of our own societies, improve our quality of life, improve our health, and ultimately sustain and uphold the natural systems that we are deeply connected to, and reliant upon. When I was teaching at the university and I would teach about climate change issues, I would often start with the date 1988. Because in 1988, I was 4 years old, and in 1988, the Government of Canada, under the leadership of then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, hosted one of the first large-scale international conferences on climate change in Toronto. And the outcome document from that conference is a text that I have used to teach because it makes very clear at a time when the politics of climate change was much simpler than it is today, what the stakes of this issue actually are. And in that document, published in 1988, so recalling that it was in the closing years of the Cold War, that document stated that the threats of climate change were greater than any other problem in the world at that time, second only to the risk of nuclear war. And so I would ask you where we stand now in a context where the risks of nuclear war have receded substantially and to the great benefit of humanity, and at a time when we have collectively failed again and again to actually curb ultimately the greenhouse gas emissions that are the primary driver of the climate change challenge. I use this date and I use this story as a way of introducing my students, who are often, shockingly, born in the 21st century, as a way of situating how long we have known about this problem with the kind of severity and the kind of urgency that we now know full well. Because there are still some, including some elected to office, including some in positions of high power and authority, who would rather pretend that there was uncertainty about this question, would rather pretend that we didn't understand fully what the scientific impacts might be, or we're not really sure how to fix the problem, or even if climate change is going to happen, surely it won't be that bad. And I beg to differ, and indeed I challenge us to pull our heads out of the sand. That is thinking that has long since ceased to be persuasive, it has long since ceased to be good enough, and I would suggest that in the year 2025, with wildfires burning across this country, with 2 provinces in Atlantic Canada under province-wide fire bans, with the costs to our economy and our community in terms of freshwater depreciation, the impacts are staggering. The impacts will continue to mount. We must do better. And part of my role and part of my responsibility in Parliament is to make that argument, to fly that flag, to represent the interests of this community as a low-lying coastal community on an island off the west coast of this continent. It is of vital importance to our future and present prosperity and well-being that we do more, that we do better, and that we do faster on this issue. I am committed to it, and we will hold the Government of Canada to account in the coming years to ensure that this priority is not lost amongst the other priorities of the